May 23rd, 2019. I'm here with Lou and Mimi Currier. Thanks for coming, guys.
Sure.
Yeah, why don't you both just state your name yourself and when you were born to
Okay.
get that out of the way.
Why don't you go first?
My name's Mary Currier, called Mimi, and I was born February 26, 1942.
Thank you.
And I'm Lou Currier. I'm her husband, and I was born in 1936. So we've been here since 1970, and that's what's going on. We came from San Francisco. I'll start unless you want.
Oh, you did?
Please go.
Yeah, we came from San Francisco. We both grew up in Ohio, northern Ohio, Cleveland. I think Mimi grew up completely in Cleveland, except for...
Yep.
And I grew up in Cincinnati. I did some time in Cincinnati when I was a young kid. And then we moved back to Cleveland. So I went to...
Where did you guys meet and get married?
We met in Cleveland in college time. Mimi was in Annapolis at St. John's for a while, and you can get into that. And she had just left that and come back home for a while. I had been at John Carroll University there, and I'd been in the art school, in Cleveland Institute of Art. And myself and another couple guys had a row house near in the university district, and we were having a party one night, and in walked Mimi and her sister, who was with her, and we hit it off, and
The rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah.
So you guys moved to San Francisco, and you came to Jerome from San Francisco.
Yeah, we got married, and after a year and a half, 2 years, we had a kid, and he was still in the crib. No, he was about 2 or 3 when we crossed the country. It was 1966, 67 at that point, and it was the flower behind the ear in San Francisco time.
Yeah.
We were part of that generation.
What were you doing for work?
We were at the time, just before we left, we were house parents in a halfway house for a mental institution at Cleveland.
That's in Cleveland.
This was in Cleveland, yeah.
Okay.
We were the house parents in a halfway house for Cleveland Clinic? No, not
Cleveland.
Ohio State Medical Psychiatric Hospital or something like that. It was a big campus, and they had different houses. And we had a house there. We had our own quarters, and we lived with maybe a dozen people who were on their way out of institutionalization, and they needed a role model. That was our function, and we didn't do any treatment. We were simply a role model, so that these people would know what they were going to run into when they left the institute.
So they had a government grant, and we were professional, normal people.
Yeah. The rest of them had all been institutionalized for some time, and they were deemed ready to release.
Yeah, was this related to your education?
No, we had
no
medical background, no psychiatric background. I was an artist. I was at the Art Institute at the time.
Oh, no kidding.
Mimi had, at this point she was taking care of the baby. But she had been in the Music Institute in dance and that sort of stuff. And so our backgrounds had nothing to do with it. It was just it was a paying job in those days, and we were young and starting out, and they gave you housing, and we had our own. Did they give us food? We had our own.
Yeah.
I thought we had our own kitchen, but I guess not. No. At any rate, so and we were newlyweds. Well, no, we were a couple of years into it by then. And there was an exodus out of Ohio at that point. It was pretty widespread, and it was all headed towards San Francisco and LA and the West Coast.
In the summer of love.
The summer of
You
love.
bet.
Yeah.
Migration, yeah.
Right. And so off we went. I cast a few hexagrams with the old I Ching, and that's what we were supposed to do. And so off we went.
And
We had another friend of ours, Bryce Wood, who's here in town now.
yeah, I'm going to interview Bryce next week.
Yeah, and he went across with us. We took a month to get across country. We had an old Chevy Impala, actually a good Chevy Impala at that point. It wasn't new, but it was a good one. And the
Camping equipment.
camping equipment in the trunk, and the three adults and my son, who was at that point walking. I remember seeing
Oh,
pictures.
he was running before he got weaned. In fact, he was so active, we had to put a harness on him when we were in the Grand Canyon.
Right, to keep him from jumping over. So we'd drive a certain distance and find a campground and put up our tent and spend the night and drive on the next day. And we did that all the way across country. And we didn't know anything about Jerome at that point. We went right by it on I-40 and went to the Grand Canyon. And then the next day we drove into California. And I forget whether we went to LA first. We had friends that were already in San Francisco.
Yeah, we went to LA first because we had friends there too.
Yeah, I think we did. And that's where we met Jack, I believe. At any rate, the incident I remember best there is when we were coming across. It had been a beautiful trip, all camping, and it was just fine weather and everything. I think it was a little late in the season, so because there wasn't too many people and traveling and stuff. But so we stopped at a gas station. We had just gotten into California, and we stopped at a gas station to fill up. And the attendant or somebody, I think it was an attendant, said, "Are you guys from out of state?" And we said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Well, you know what it's like in California?" And I said, "What?" He says, "Like turning the volume all the way up."
To 11.
Yeah. So off we went up to San Francisco. We were there for 3 years, I think, 2 or 3 years. I got some work with a guy named Bill Bland. He was from Wisconsin, he and his wife, and they had a son that was about our son Chris's age. So we were making architectural graphics, which is signage for skyscrapers and exterior signage and stuff for different things. We did the internal stuff by the elevator where you see where everything is and all that.
Right, okay.
Plus we did exterior stuff. At any rate. And it was, this was 1968, 69. Mimi, was it? Yeah, it must have been that period. We were doing that for a living, but I also got a job working with KPFA in Berkeley, reading news. It was Vietnam time, so I wasn't reading it. It was a writer. I wrote some of the news. So, and Mimi was working at the Berkeley Clinic, wasn't it? Remember that?
Not much.
It was 1968.
Yeah, if you remember too much, you weren't there, that sort of thing. But we were there for some of the riots in Berkeley over People's Park.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I think you were at the clinic, because I remember you treating people for tear gases.
I wasn't treating
and stuff.
anybody. I just hung out at some of the things of if you run into problems, this is what you might do. But nothing ever came of it.
Yeah, we weren't really too deeply involved, but we were on the fringes of that whole scene.
Yeah, so how old were you at this time?
I would have
roughly?
been in my early 30s.
Okay.
31, 32, somewhere
No
like that.
concerns about the draft?
I had been in the military.
Ah.
When I was younger, when I was in my early 20s, I volunteered for the draft, or for the Army. I joined the Army.
Post-Vietnam and post-Korea, pre-Vietnam.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, pre-Vietnam. And so I had done time in Germany in the Army.
Okay.
I was in the Signal Corps. I was a communications guy. And I had a security clearance and all that good shit. But,
Right.
just so people understand where I was. But I didn't like, when I got out of the Army, they were calling for volunteers to go over to Nam, and I didn't think that was a good idea. I knew enough about it by that time. I remember I was in Germany for when the Berlin Wall went up, when the Russians sealed Berlin and we were flying stuff in. And when that went up, they put us all on.
Folks, when it went up, not when it came down.
No, when it went up. I was in the military and I was in Germany. We all went out and hid in the woods and, got ready for the attack.
Yeah.
And I looked around, and by that time I was in my 20s. I was 22, 23 probably. And I looked around and everybody was 18 and 17. And I thought, these kids are in high school. And I was only a few years older. And I thought, I don't want to be them to be with them in this situation, I want to get out of this shit. So I did not take a second tour. I just said I'd go home, and that was enough. And
Wow, okay, did not know that. Well, let's circle back around to San Francisco. It sounds like you guys were keeping busy, but not really
No,
finding your passion.
Right, I was
there.
doing some easel painting, and
I didn't know about that about you, Lou. I didn't know. I'm a
I
painter
have
too,
lots.
we never talked about it. That's funny.
right, no, I was doing some easel painting, and as I said, we did this architectural graphics, so that was calligraphy and that sort of stuff was involved in that, and woodworking. We had a nice little woodworking shop. So that was, and as I say, we both had sons. Bill Bland and I both had sons, and the kids went to Montessori, and they were together in Montessori, and I think that may have been how I got the job. At any rate, Bill his story was that he had come across, just within the year prior to my meeting him, I think. So he had only been in San Francisco a little while. And in his travel across, he had taken a wrong turn and wound up in Jerome, by accident, as I understand it. And so while we were working there, and this was, the war was going on. I mean, Berkeley was erupting. There were big riots in Oakland where the boats left for Nam and that sort of shit. And then every night you'd see the planes coming back with the bodies here. They'd fly in at sunset or right around, and we all knew that. And living in San Francisco, you're right on the edge. You really are of communications, because it's that kind of a city, and it's a lefty city. And so this was not a popular war in Vietnam.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In fact, it was, you know what it was like.
Well,
But,
and I lived in San Francisco
Okay.
from 77 to 84.
yeah, well, this would have been a little earlier.
Yes.
But
Tear gas in the streets.
tear gas in the streets, the cops marching up and down, beating people over the head, riots in Berkeley, tear gas rolling you through Sproul Plaza, Telegraph Avenue it was all happening. The Angels were the Black Panthers. We lived in the Fillmore in San Francisco,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and that was Black Panther territory. And so we never had any. In fact, I thought they were my friends, and I still do. I thought they were the righteous guys,
I thought we lived in the Western Addition.
Well, it was right on the edge. Yeah, I guess you are.
Yeah,
You're
that's
probably
right.
right. It was the Western Addition, but it was right the top of Sutter.
Yeah.
Sutter and
I lived at California and Fillmore, so.
right,
yeah,
Sutter and Presidio is where we live.
Oops.
So
Should we
yeah,
No.
fix that, Mimi?
I've been trying to.
The little, let me come,
yeah. That's
you got it?
I got it.
I think the clip is a little small for that microphone, and that's
Okay.
why.
Mimi. Do you want to take over and say
No.
something?
Well, let me ask you, Mimi, what were you doing at that time?
Not much.
Were you just you had a kid and you were doing that? That's a full-time job.
Sort of. I was also volunteering at the Montessori school so that we could afford to send Chris there.
Okay.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
So, did you guys like San Francisco?
I did. I loved it. I thought it was great.
I thought it was a magic city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it too. It's really a cool place.
Yeah, we were within walking distance of Haight-Ashbury,
Uh-huh.
and we knew Robert Crumb, who was over there
Yeah.
at the time. We knew him from Ohio. We moved in different circles in Ohio. Well, no, he dated Mimi's sister, so we knew him
Oh, my
quite
goodness.
well.
Crumb, the
Yeah.
comic.
Mr. Natural.
Yeah,
that
and
guy.
a very startling film about him and his family. Was
Yeah, yeah.
Called Crumb, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
So we knew him real well, quite well.
Holy
And we'd
cow.
hang out with him at his house sometimes and that sort of stuff.
Well, there's a whole story there.
Yeah, that's a different game. We were aware of all the acid and grass and all that good stuff that was moving around. The guys next door, Kid Charlemagne lived next door here, that sort of stuff. But
Okay, well, was that, I mean, I don't want to get too personal, and you can certainly not answer, but was that part of your lifestyle?
oh yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah,
Yeah, me too.
yeah. I figured. But at any rate, so Bill Bland, the guy I was working with, he got some mail one day that said, "Hey, there's this house in Jerome, 13 rooms, 2 kitchens, a big workshop downstairs, 5 city lots, $7,000."
A complete woodworking shop just half a block away.
Yeah, for another 1,000. So it was where Mike Butcher now lives.
Oh,
that
behind the
house.
school.
Yeah, that
Okay.
house. So it was also commune time, if you'll recall.
Yeah.
So we looked at each other, and the city was bubbling. The city was bubbling, and we both had young kids. And at least in my mind, I thought, if I stay here much longer, I'm going to be in jail because I don't like this war at all. And I was also working in Berkeley and reading news or writing news and all that stuff. And he must have felt the same. So we had a couple of friends, and I think he came up with the idea, let's form a commune and make classical guitars.
This is Bill.
This is Bill, Bill
Okay.
Bland. And we'll move to Jerome, and we'll do that. So we found another couple, and then a single guy, and so that gave us 3, and he and his wife 4, 5, and Mimi and I 6, 7, and the 2 kids. And Bill and I came down and took a look at the situation to see what it was. And Mimi wanted me to take pictures and do all that stuff. She couldn't leave because we had Chris there and all
Yeah.
that stuff. So we did, and I took all these pictures. And I got back, and of course none of them came out either. I didn't have film in the camera or
Didn't
something.
have the lens cap off.
So
And he did forget all the postcards about Jerome he had also picked up.
So you had to take his word for it.
yeah, and that was
Jerome,
not.
Arizona.
And she was not happy about that, and I don't blame her. But it was just one of many incidents in our life together.
Wow. So had you any?
So anyway, we did it. We did it.
No common experience before that, or
No, none of it.
Any
Oh,
inclination to
Never made a guitar in my life. Although my uncle
no
was
kidding.
my uncle was a music. My grandfather was a band leader. My uncle was a pianist and had a piano shop, and so we had music in the family, in my family.
And Bill had some instrumental.
Bill. Well, I don't. No, I don't think he had any.
I have no
background.
idea.
I don't recall him ever having. I don't think any of us could play a guitar. You know, I never did learn. Although, and I'm not sure he did either. But what we did is we sent Bill and this other guy to L.A. and they studied with a Spanish master of classical guitar for 6 months and how to make guitars, and he taught them. And we made the move, and we got this shop, which you're having trouble.
I'm fine.
Okay, we had this shop, so we could take a telephone pole and turn it into a guitar. We had industrial equipment. It was an industrial wood shop equipment with heavy table saws and band saws and all kinds of stuff, rotary saws and planers and shapers and all that shit. And so we started, and we started cranking out guitars, and we made several in the course of the project. We kept that thing going for 3 years, that guitar
Amazing.
shop. And we bought...
That was a gutsy move. I mean,
But it was that kind of time. You could hitchhike from San Francisco to here and back and never have a problem. And I did it several times. We hitchhiked back and forth several times. Not to mention driving, but you could do that. When we were in to give you a feel for the time, when we were in San Francisco, we were visiting friends who had lived out by the beach. And as we were leaving, this young guy runs up to me and says, "Hey, my brother just died in Idaho or Iowa or someplace, and I've got to leave. I've got to go back for the funeral. This is my van over here," and it was a bread van, a beautiful step-in bread van. Beautiful, brand fresh paint job. When I looked into it, it was completely furnished like a camper. And it had a beautiful sound system. It was all, the guy had obviously poured thousands of dollars into it. And he says,
Mimi?
"Here's my key. Here's my key. If I'm not back in a couple of weeks, it's yours." And I said, I didn't know who this guy was. He was just a stranger off the street.
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." So the guy never came back. I kept the key and I got the car, the thing. And so I suddenly had this van.
The
Now,
plates were about to get too old.
The plates?
And license plate?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying.
And the cops started looking at it and walking around it, and they were going to confiscate it if we didn't do something with it. So we gave it to a hitchhiker.
we picked it up. We drove it for a while, but parking is a problem in that area, in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I had to keep moving and all this shit. So one day Mimi's out driving it around, and she picks up a hitchhiker, and he's just another young guy. And she brought him home. We had coffee and everything. And when he left, he had the band. And it was it was that kind of a deal,
Wow.
The city was just everything was wide open. It was just one of the. It was an unusual time. It was an
Yes.
unusual time.
Yeah.
And so to go back then to the tale.
Yeah, you came back with
So we
with
came
some
out here and-
information about Jerome to present to Mimi.
Right. And we formed a
No
company.
information about
And
Jerome.
no information came. So what'd you think, Mimi? Like, I guess we'll just throw the dice or go back and get some more?
Yep,
That was it.
All of the above. Huh?
yep.
So we came out here and formed a company.
Jerome, Arizona.
Yeah, really. At that point, there were 250 people here. This was 1970. And we came on Halloween night, was it? Halloween night. And you know this story. You can tell
Frontier.
this story
Yeah.
about Halloween night,
You,
right?
what were
No.
you?
The fire.
Oh. No, that was the first Christmas.
Was it? No, I thought it was Halloween. Well, no, you're right. There was snow on the ground because of the fire. Okay, well, so we moved in, and the next incident I remember was the fire at the candle shop.
Everybody was in Spook Hall because of the children's Christmas party.
Okay.
And the fire alarm went off. The siren went off. Everybody looked at their watch. It was the wrong time, and the place emptied.
Right. And they ran up, and where it was, it's where Arizona Discoveries is now. It was right by town
Yeah.
hall at the time.
Yeah.
And the place, it was a candle shop, and with lots of wax and lots of paraffin and all that good stuff. And they, there was a great deal of activity real quick, and they knocked the fire down. I remember what was his name, the yoga master?
Jerome Tweedy.
Jerome Tweedy. Tweedy, was it? Yeah, I guess it was.
Tweedie, I think.
Right. Tweedy, Jerome, he was a tall, young, blonde, Brahmin kind of guy, dressed always in white. And nice, pleasant guy, late 20s, early 30s, somewhere there. And he was a yoga master. And he had what's now used to be Muma's hotel or whatever it is. It's
Yeah,
now
yeah.
that place. Whatever.
Go City Inn.
Yeah,
That was-
Ghost City Inn. He had Ghost.
That was the Jerome Ashram.
Yeah, it was an ashram at that point, and he was the man, and he was the hose man on this
No kidding.
thing to put out the fire, and he was in and out and around, and he never got a bit of dust on him. He was perfect.
His white robe was
Yeah,
Stayed
it's
white.
spotless.
Yeah, spotless. And they knocked the fire down, and that was the end of the
Oh,
fire.
man. So Jerome had a pretty well organized volunteer.
Well, I
fire
wouldn't say
department
that.
then.
What they did is they
They had
left,
one good guy, and he
they
was.
left the hoses out to dry by stretching them down up and down Main Street there, and of course they froze. So we didn't have any fire department for the next several days here.
Oh wow!
But,
Hey, I have some matches underneath that little flap.
It looks like it's going to break.
Nah, it probably is. It's pretty old. Well, I hope it doesn't break during the interview.
Right.
That's why I'm trying not to.
You know,
I think
Yes.
it'll be okay.
it doesn't look like
It's
Yeah, it
fairly
is.
strong.
Okay. Okay. But anyway.
All right, I'll get some glue on that tomorrow. But I want to circle. I'm curious. You said you bought the property behind the school where Michael Butcher and Mary are now. And if I remember, there's two houses back there.
Well,
there's the one they live in, and then there's the one that's butt right back up against.
Yeah,
Right,
Babbitt owned that one.
Oh,
Bruce Babbitt's family owned
Bruce
that.
Babbitt.
Yes,
That Babbitt.
and they stole his grandmother's couch to make a guitar or
Right.
dulcimers or something.
It was his grandmother's house or something. There was nobody in it, and then
Yeah,
they
there
rented.
were.
And then they rented it to this couple from Maui, not Maui, but the Marianas. Wasn't she from the Marianas?
Micronesia,
Micronesia. One
Okay.
of the woman was, and the guy was
CIA.
CIA. I think he was. Yeah, yeah. At any rate, they were just again. These were middle life people.
Right. Well, let me get this clear. I'm a little confused. You came with Bill Brand.
Right.
And
Bland.
Bland.
B-L-A-N-D.
B-L-A-N-D. Thank you. And so all of you move into this property back there.
Right, but that didn't include that house.
The house next door.
Right.
Okay,
It did
all
not.
right.
We did not own that one.
So I didn't realize that the butcher house was that big.
Oh, it's a good sized piece of property.
And there's a shop back there as
downstairs.
Oh,
downstairs
okay.
in the back is this wood shop,
So-
and it's quite big. It's bigger than this room.
So this must have been I'm.
This was
I'm trying to
1970.
yeah, I'm trying to picture you all. You're all very close friends, I assume.
Right.
The
We lived
families?
upstairs. We had the upstairs. Mimi and I and Chris had the upstairs. Bill and Betty and their son
Abe.
had the downstairs. The first weekend we were there, the other couple, and I don't remember their names now, went to Phoenix for some reason and got stopped by the cops. And he was hot. He was
A draft dodger.
a draft dodger. He was dodging the draft. And they hauled him away, and we never heard from him again.
Oh boy.
And they left his girlfriend sitting by the side of the road. And we went down and brought her home, but she moved on in a couple of days,
Yeah.
very shortly.
Hey.
And so he was from Hawaii. Nice guy.
I'm gonna just take a break.
Okay.
And I gotta fix that. That's not. This isn't gonna work. What are we gonna do? Here, let me. A little super glue. Yeah, maybe some duct tape or something.
You want to leave the cameras running?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the camera going.
Okay.
It's much easier. But I got some nice gaffer tape here, and we'll just do a little MacGyver on this little guy. Okay. Being very stubborn. Come on. Get in there. All right. My apologies.
No.
We're in a shoestring budget here.
Maybe shoestring to tie it on.
This should do something, I would think.
Just don't put it over the...
Yeah, don't put it over the microphone. All right, now we got it. Sorry about this, Mimi.
That's all right.
And I'm going to be a bit of a pain in the butt. I'm noticing that you're moving and touching your shirt as we're here, kind of fidgeting, for lack of a better word, and all that noise comes through. So I'm going to ask you to, if you want something to grab or hold on to, I'll give you something like that. But
Oh, I'll just break the table.
don't do that. Let's see that. Oh, that's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, just lean on it and it opens up a little bit. That's okay.
I've got there's a board coming out here
Good.
from here. So it should be supported. And I won't be upset if this table takes a dump. Oops.
You took
Okay,
Mimi's
your
cup.
coffee. And what? Okay, back to business. So, I think, I don't know, I think a lot of people would find it curious a little bit of, how did this work? In reality, of 5 or 6 people decide to buy a house together and live together in this far off place and do some new business you've never done before. Seems like quite a social challenge and a familial challenge.
The history seems to be that communes have a life expectancy of about 3 years. And that's what this one had.
Okay.
To be fair, most of the money came from Bill. In fact, probably all of it. I don't know, a lot of it. He wound up with the house. He wound up with all that stuff.
Bill and Betty divorced. They each sold the place and moved to Tucson. He opened a low-end guitar shop and she opened a high-end guitar shop in Tucson.
Wow.
And
They didn't work together?
No, no.
no, they fell apart.
Okay.
They got a divorce. That's
I see.
part of what made the whole thing collapse.
Oh, that
The stray.
That started to happen before they left Jerome.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
That's why they left Jerome.
The guy, the seventh man, the other guy, turned out to have a real alcohol problem. And although he was pretty good at guitar making, he wasn't good at holding it together. So he, and again, I don't even remember his name now, but he turned out to be unusable, unworkable.
Right.
And so we made 7 or 8 guitars probably in the 3 years. Then
Sold them out of Fern's shop.
Yes, out of.
Oh, out of Fern?
Well, they bought.
That's Gary's friend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they bought. Fern and Betty opened a shop where it's right next to Jeannie Moss's place. That one with the. Who's in there now? The Mockingbird, I think, might be in it now.
Yeah.
They opened a boutique, and we sold guitars out of that, and other stuff. The 2 gals did that. That was the time of Coons Crossing Country Day School, too, as I recall. And you were involved in that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're talking 72, 73.
71 through 70 through 73, I think. That sort of
Okay,
thing.
and was there much tourist and consumer traffic coming through?
No.
Yeah, it
There
must
was
have been difficult to sell a guitar.
we called the shop Mingus Mountain Luthiers.
And Downhill Trading Company.
And Downhill Trading
yeah,
Company.
okay.
And there was a story about the people in Cottonwood or Clarkdale who thought those Lucifers up there, they're devil worshippers. They're devil worshippers. And so, but at this time, people were leaving the cities. They were, in the 70s, the movement was back to Mother Earth, get out of the cities, do a commune. Now we just fit right in.
Yeah.
And people started moving into Jerome. Oh, the story about the East Village Other. When we got to Jerome, it turns out I don't think I left the property for a year. I stayed there, I made guitars, I cooked, I did different things, but I didn't socialize, I didn't go out. There was a story about Camp Verde. There was a bar in Camp Verde that had a big sign on it that said, "We'll pay for anybody that brings in a long hippie hair, hippie's hair."
Scalp, huh?
Scalp. There was a lot of that. Camp Verde was awful. It was dangerous territory for hippies.
Did you have long hair?
Oh, sure. We had long hair, and we were classical hippies. So that was going on. Arizona was not friendly to our way of life. Jerome was still policed by the county. They drove a squad car through a couple times a year, a day sometimes. We had a night watchman who was a mute. And if he wanted to stop you, he'd hold up a sign that said, "Halt," and it would be misspelled. He was an old guy.
That was the mine companies.
Yeah, he worked for the mine company.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
The mines were closed. Mine was closed, but there was still peripheral people around. What was his name, the guy that killed himself?
I don't remember. I remember the county sheriff that gave several hours of time to Jerome, who was a real nice guy named Bill Helms.
Yeah.
And when there were some drug people, hard drug people that came to town, he went up, knocked on their door, and introduced himself to them. And they were gone by the next morning.
There really, as far as I know, there was no real hard drugs in town for any length of time at that point. There was lots of marijuana. Everybody was stoned most of the time. It was just, and we partied. We had lots of potlucks. They had potlucks all the time, and it was a communal thing. And people were moving in. Oh, I started to tell you the story of the East Village Other. We got to town, and it turned out, I found out later that a month before we moved in, the East Village Other, which was an underground paper out of New York City, I don't know if you're aware
No,
of
not familiar.
they were like the alternative press out of New York City, had run an article. Somebody had written them a letter, and they published it. It said, hey, I found this great little town in Arizona. There's only like a couple hundred people there, and it's a beautiful place, and we can all move in and take it over, and it'll be great. And they published this, and they got a hold of it in Jerome, and the county and the government mailed it out with the water bill. Right?
As a warning.
Yeah. So we were not well received.
Yeah.
It was very touchy.
Tell me, how many, percentage-wise, do you think the population of old-timers, I guess, left over from the mine days, and you newcomers with 50-50?
There was another group of newcomers that came between us and the old timers. It was an arty group that came in, and there aren't many of them left anymore. But Winifred was part of that. The Aardvark people were part of
Matthews, yeah.
that. Yeah, there were.
Winnie Foster was here. Well, she was an old timer. Was she?
No.
No, she was not. Winnie Foster. Was a gal that we have a painting of his from L.A. They ran the art thing down where the by
The
post
Holts.
office. The Holts, yeah.
Roger and
Holt.
Sean Holt.
Roger Holt was here. He was he hung in the museum in the MoMA in L.A.
No, New York City.
New York, was it? I thought it was L.A.
Metropolitan Museum of Art. And,
Yeah,
Well,
he
I've
was
seen
here.
a couple of his paintings. Now, when you say this group, how big?
Oh,
They
three
were-
dozen people.
Uh-huh. Who all came together?
No, but around that time, after the mine closed, but before the hippies came.
Huh.
There's quite a few people who showed up then.
I
It's a
think,
little more from the beatnik era.
yeah,
No, well-
beat. Well,
No, they weren't beatniks.
Well, you know what I'm saying, the Jack Kerouac kind of 50s.
They weren't that.
no, they
They
weren't.
weren't like that?
No,
Early hippies?
Holt,
No,
no, they
Well,
just- they were artist types.
Okay.
they were bohemian, let's say,
Okay. All right.
but not.
Huh, I have not heard this.
Yeah, Roger Holt would be a classic example.
The Aardvark people,
Yeah, he was he a sculptor? Oh, I don't-
sculptor and painter.
right.
So were people buying
So they had
property
they
here, or
had
just
Yeah.
homesteading, or just moving?
property was cheap.
Uh-huh.
As I say, we bought all that whole property for $7,000 at the time. This was in 1970.
Yeah.
There was still quite a few Mexican, the old families, the Santians and the others. I forget the names now. But
Sandoval.
Sandovals, and they were left over from the mine,
Right.
mostly. Ortega.
And, the Voynix.
The Voynix were here. Those folks from Middle Europe were here. There was still Danny Vladic and that whole group.
Right.
And there was a guy who's, there were several of them. They were still here.
Julie Perkins' family.
Perkins was around.
Yeah. Now,
and-
did you feel
No, they
comfortable
were
with them, or
not
kinda
they were not
standoffish?
hostile. But there was the old mining people like Laura Williams, who had been the secretary for the mine, was very hostile, and Doc Pop Jones, I think he was hostile, and maybe I don't know. It never really surfaced, but it was always this tension,
Right.
at least for some time. And when did Fern come? Is that somebody else?
That's Lori. Lori, be quiet.
When did Fern come?
Around the time we did.
Yeah, Fern moved
But her
in.
family had been coming here
Right, and
for years.
Shapiro was with her at the time, I
Yeah.
think. And
There was a whole group of Phoenix hippies that showed up.
maybe Ann Bassett.
Ed Cooper, they all knew each other.
Yeah, they
Okay.
came up. The town, looking at it as a structure, there were a lot of empty places, a lot of empty houses that were in disrepair but were salvageable. For the first several years, we would reclaim a house every year or so. And then after all those got reclaimed, then we would build a house one house maybe once a year. Somebody would come in and build a new house.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you say you would restore a house, was this something you took on your own? Was it part of a government program? Why were you doing that?
There were several. This is longer than, this is all through the 70s, let's say,
Okay.
all through the 70s.
Mimi, you?
Richard Martin was basically the lead carpenter on those, especially the Company Hill houses.
Well, I understand, yeah, there was some sort of...
That was
grant to
76.
keep them.
Yeah.
You could stay there for pretty damn cheap if you did some work on it.
Right, right.
That was
The
1976. I think,
Restoration
I think.
Commission.
Right.
Yeah, because it was a centennial thing. So it was 76, I remember that. Yeah, what we did there was they set up a corporation. PD was still owned the mine, and PD got together with the town and the county and the feds, and probably the CSO was involved.
No, they would never have been involved.
Okay, they were hostile, whoever they were.
Histosoc might have been involved.
Histosoc might have been involved, but they were pretty scattered and not.
Histosoc? What's that?
Historical Society?
Oh,
Yeah.
I've never heard it put like that.
Oh yeah, no, they're
I'm going
the
to start using that, Mimi.
yeah. It's just
It's hard to get the whole thing out.
At any rate, so they put that whole grant together, and the deal was you could get the corporation would own the house, and you could live there for putting X amount of sweat equity into it, sweat labor. And then after a while, the corporation decided to sell the properties to the individuals that had
Right.
worked on it.
Yeah.
But that was not part of the original. The original was just the corporation owns it, you live there and
Right.
spend.
Yeah. Scotty Nessel Road told me a bit about that.
Yeah.
And so did Richard Martin.
And
Yeah.
the town got funding to put in plumbing, to get all the plumbing straightened out.
Right. No. So, who were your friends when the first 2 or 3 years that you hung out with? And
Well, Fern, we met Fern.
Fern and Gary.
okay.
Who?
Gary.
Gary, yeah.
Shapiro.
And there were a lot of people who came and went. And Jesus, I don't remember names anymore.
Mary Johnson, Winifred Foster,
Yeah, those were
the
old timers.
Matthews.
The old-
Mary Johnson, I'm not sure how old timer she was. She wasn't part of the mine company
Right.
group. I think she was part of the early next group.
So you had a mixture of old timers, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
and newcomers like yourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was
Santillan, David Santillan, we got to know him pretty well at that point,
Mm-hmm.
didn't
would you say you guys were all roughly the same age? You know, late 20s, early 30s, somewhere in there?
we? I think so.
Well, there's 6 years difference, so
Yeah.
Yeah, see, Mimi was in her late 20s when I
I'm
was in
thinking
my
of you
early
guys
30s. Yeah,
plus the people that came here
yeah,
as well.
yeah.
well, Winifred was much older. Mary Johnson was somewhat older. The Aardvark people were a little bit older, and some were younger.
Would you characterize most of them as creatives in some sense?
Yeah, yeah. They're
That's
not
what-
necessarily hippies.
That's when it got closer to being an art colony than a hippie thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Rome.
Rome
kinda
was
like
here at
that,
the
Right.
because
time.
He
He was here at
wasn't
the
really a partier, hippie kind of guy. He just wanted to come to a cheap place and paint.
Dempsey was here.
Okay.
The restaurant was up and running.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right.
That was a major function.
Yeah. I came.
They drew a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there was that, but there was a carriage trade. There was a carriage trade, And there was a lot of jewelers moved in. Jewelry, making jewelry was in little craft work. There was a sandal maker. There was like Tracy was. Oh, when did he show up? He was Aram.
Tracy and Carol Whitner
Yeah,
came
Carol Whitner,
together.
that's
Yeah,
right.
they were here. They
were
all
married,
this
yeah.
all came in.
Bought the mortuary.
She bought the mortuary.
And then they set up Skyfire in it
Yeah.
until it moved uptown.
Yep.
And so that all happened in the 70s, I
Now,
believe. I mean, it's hard.
What did you guys do to make a living? I mean, after the guitar thing.
Well, after the thing fell apart, Mimi and I fell apart very quickly. I went back to San Francisco
Oh, no kidding.
for a couple of years. And Mimi got a house here in the Gulch.
The one you're in now?
No, one up the gulch, a house down from Scott Owen's house.
Okay.
Oh,
and
Scott was here.
Okay. It's noisy on East Avenue today.
What can I say? They know. So, so I went back to the city, and Mimi should take over now. What was going on while I was gone?
Not a lot.
Yeah,
So this was when? 70,
73.
70. Oh, really?
Yeah, 73,
Wow, so-
74 and 5. I was in San Francisco.
So the
pretty much.
commune kind of blew lots of stuff apart.
Yeah, yeah. As I say, there.
When they divorced, there
Right.
wasn't anything.
Anything holding it together.
Right.
And jobs were hard to find.
That's why I asked.
I did work at Penmore,
Well, it was
That's
Penmore,
right.
maybe.
the underwear factory,
Down
down in Cottonwood.
Oh, okay.
Down by the Smeller City down in that area.
Oh, hadn't heard of that one.
They were, several of the women in town worked down there, I think, didn't they? For a while. They were not good employers, but
Right.
it was,
But
it was
one of
money.
the few
It was
jobs
money,
around,
yeah. And then I came back, because I was driving a cab in San Francisco during that period, and which I enjoyed, but I didn't make a lot of money, and I didn't like being away from Mimi, so we worked out our problems, and I came back, but it was still hard to make a living. I think the CETA grants came through about that time, didn't they? Johnson was in office, I think,
Yep.
and the CETA program was hiring, and I worked on the city road crew. Not the city road, the county road crew.
Okay.
When did I work for the city, though? I worked for the city after the
A couple of different times, yeah.
Yeah. So I went through a period where I was...
When Jamie was on the council.
Right.
Because he was the one that said, apply for the clerk's job.
Well, yeah, but remember I worked on the town crew for a couple of years, too.
Yep, well,
I forget when that... Must have been... I don't know. It was in the 70s. Late 70s. We're into the latter half of the 70s. I worked a couple of years for the town crew. I worked for a couple of years for the county crew, town road crew. I got a job as
fireman.
fireman for the county at Verde Rural. I worked with them for a couple of years.
Well, that was probably a decent job.
Yeah, that was okay. But I gave that up because I realized that was about 100 pounds lighter than everybody else on the job. And at that point, I was still like 135. I weighed 135 for years when I smoked. And when I quit smoking, I put on 30 pounds. But I was still smoking at that point, I think. So I weighed 135, and those guys all weighed 250 and 300
Yeah.
pounds. And I thought, if I ever go down in a fire, I'll never be able to get them out.
Right.
And I thought, that's not fair. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So I gave that up. And then I got a job with Dempsey, washing dishes and working in the kitchen with him. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I got a job. The town hired me as town clerk. and that was in early 80s, I think. And I did that for a couple of years, 3 years, 2 years. And that was under the Kinsella, Jimmy Kinsella.
Oh, Jimmy.
Jimmy Kinsella was mayor. First it was Dick Martin was mayor,
Yes.
and he hired me. Well, his council hired me. And then he left office, and I worked, and Jimmy Kinsella followed, and I worked with him for a while. And then JIC was opened.
instrument company.
The instrument company. And I had made good friend. Barbara Blackburn was in town at that point. She and Greg were together, Greg Driver.
Okay.
And
Can I?
Sure, go ahead.
Can I interrupt for a second? I want to kind of back up a little bit. So Mimi, Lou goes to San Francisco. You and Chris were here, so you're a single mom for a while. And I'm curious about the community that you found yourself in, and was it helpful? Did you have a lot of friends? Was it, what kind of?
It was okay.
Okay, you want to elaborate on that a little
No.
bit?
I don't remember a whole lot about it.
Okay. Was it a good place to raise a child? You feel safe?
Well, that was the nice thing about leaving from a town where there was tear gas in the streets to
Yeah,
one where
yeah.
you can kick your kid out. We had these wallboard, wasn't wallboard, but it was some kind of stuff we put on the walls, these panels that you could stick.
Like a pegboard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, well, no, it didn't have holes for thumbtacks
It's
and stuff like
the
that.
precursor to
And we
sheetrock.
wasn't sheetrock.
No, I said the precursor.
Wasn't precursor to sheetrock.
Oh, okay. Maybe
But it was this soft stuff you could put thumbtacks in, and we could kick Chris out, and he could bring back stuff to pin on the wall, his nature collection.
Oh, nice.
And one time this cowboy came in. He said, "I heard you wanted a scorpion, so I brought you a scorpion." And there's this dead scorpion in the bottle, so we picked it to the wall, and then it started to crawl around this, circling the pin that was stuck in him, because he wasn't dead. He was just sleeping.
Oh, my goodness. Now, did Chris have a lot of friends? Were there other children?
Oh, yeah. In fact, if he was here, he could talk about the kids' tour of Jerome, which was far more dangerous.
The kids tour?
Yes. The
I'm not
old mine shafts
Oh,
and
where
tunnels,
the
and
kids would disappear to
Right.
get in trouble for snooping around.
if you knew about it.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm sure they all,
Oh, he had once was not going to invite us to the parties the kids had on the top of the mountain. This was later when he was in high school, because we didn't have to know anything about what was going on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So did there were other mothers here that you guys watched each other's kids? Were you working? Were people working? Or I'm just curious about the community life.
Well, he was old enough by then to just kick out,
Uh-huh. Okay.
and he'd come back home.
And now where are you living at this point?
In a house down in the Gulch. I had managed to get through the Santillan family a house. Oh, I was working for Ava and Fern.
that's right.
First, I was working for Fern, and then I was working for Ava, because originally Ava was working for Fern, and then Fern worked for Ava.
Fern was a jeweler?
No, to do clothing.
Okay.
Women's clothing mostly.
Oh, okay.
Ava
vests.
Gutierrez, you know her?
Alfredo's
No,
wife.
no, uh-uh.
She has the business Alfredo's wife.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I would be cutting patterns for Fern, and she'd do the sewing of them. I forgot where I was going with that.
You were also working on jewelry, weren't you?
Oh, not much, no.
Not much, mostly clothing. What were you doing? The question was, what were you doing?
What was the community like? And
Yeah.
I was
Yes.
working for Fern, yeah.
yeah. any interactions with the other parents, or I don't know, what was your social life
Oh,
like?
well, we tried to do a parent-teacher organization with the school down in Clarkdale, but that didn't turn out, that didn't last long.
Okay.
The principal at the school at the time would pay the teachers the highest salary in the area because that way they'd keep their mouth shut and not complain about the incompetence that was going on.
I see. I see. Was the school up here, the high school open?
No, that closed by then.
Okay. All right.
The high school was open when we first moved here, but it did close after,
Yeah.
Real quick.
in the early 70s, I
So they
think.
had a bus come up and grab the kids, take them down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, you come back from San Francisco, Lou, about 75, 76, and
Yeah,
you
then I
guys,
worked.
get back together and you start trying to find some work.
Which-
This is a common story I've heard from a lot of people that
if
you know
you're
you
into-
kind of had to do a little bit of everything to get by.
If you're in Jerome, you swing from branch to branch.
Yeah,
you
I'm
know.
doing that myself.
Yeah,
these
no,
days.
that's
Yeah.
the standard. And I always said that some people follow a career and move around from place to place. I rather stay with a place and move around from career to career. you
Yes,
know,
as
that
the
sort of thing.
opportunities present. Yeah. I call it multiple streams.
Yeah, yeah,
I also worked for Dempsey briefly.
that's right. That's right.
Oh yeah, at the restaurant.
Yep.
Yeah, I was so bummed. I just missed him. I was trying to contact him to interview
Oh, that's
him.
too bad.
And I'm trying to get Mary on Saturday.
Oh,
do you,
good.
Just to interject, excuse us, folks. She still opens the House of Joy on the weekend? She's there for a few hours.
I have no idea.
I really don't know.
Oh, okay, I don't know her, and I need an introduction, so I can politely ask her if she would be interested in doing this. So anyway, enough of that. Back to our story.
Okay, so yeah, I went through several incarnations there. First, I became a fireman, and then I think first I became a county road crew. Then I became a fireman. I was also on the Jerome Fire Department for a while, I think just before that, but only for a year or so. I wasn't, and then I became a county fireman. I remember Jerry Barber was with us at that point. He was in town.
And Hildy.
And Hildy, they lived right next to us when we had that house. So I came back, and Mimi was living in this house down on the Gulch. It's the first house on the Allen Springs Road as you head past after the Ford.
Okay.
It's the one that's you drive that weird driveway and go up there, and it sits up and looks down. That's the house.
Oh, the one on the little hill by itself.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
that's I almost bought that place.
Really?
In 2000.
For sale? I don't
Yes,
think
it
it
was.
would.
From who?
The one that has a tiny little
No,
No, that's
thing on
Scott.
top of it.
That's Scott's.
That's Scott Owens.
Okay.
This was the one.
2 doors down.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The one just down the hill is the old Ortega place, Mrs. Ortega's place, which Lee Loudon now owns.
Okay.
And then when there was ours.
I got you.
As you cross the Ford, immediately there's a driveway that heads up on your right, and it goes up to this house that sits up there, and that's the house
Okay.
we lived in.
We got it for $25 a month and $50 a month put into fixing up the house.
Right.
And it was not in that good shape. In fact, the termites had eaten out the support posts, and the thing was sitting on its door frames, its lower door frames. And we put on a new roof, we put on electrical, we put in the wallboard, and ultimately a septic tank and bathroom.
Right.
Oh, well, so you did purchase the house?
No,
No, this
we
was
got to live in it for fixing it.
Okay.
And we did right by fixing it.
Great.
Yeah, we lived there for like 15 or 16,
13 years.
13 years. And that's when we became, when we had our herd of burros. We ran a herd of burros
No
up there.
way.
Yeah. When we worked for Dempsey, one night we were having dinner with him, he and Mary, after work, and Mimi said something to the effect that she really liked burros. They were good animals. And the next day we had 3 of them. Yeah, that's because he had burros out at.
Jerome, Delilah, and the baby.
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
JJ.
You had him out at the house out here in the
Yeah.
Well,
so
we used them to haul water from Hildy's and the Gulch to up in the corral because we didn't have running water yet.
Oh,
Right.
We could not put in running water until we had a septic system sufficient to flush a toilet. So we had to use the old WPA outhouse. It was labeled outhouse. It was labeled WPA. And the hole was new and fresh and with the cement pad and everything in place, but the house was gone. So we took this old truck that we got called Air Police with Air Police on the sides and the roof, and went down to Clarkdale and got an old outhouse, put it on the back. I wish I had a photograph of that. Yeah. And brought it up to Jerome and put it in on the base that we had. It was WPA, so it was interchangeable parts. Even the little tabs were right in the right places. And we got it out of the yard and into place the day before the health inspector came. And he came and looked at it, and we said, where do we put the septic tank? Where do we put the seepage pits? Because look what we're facing with this 30-degree incline. And he said, first of all, the outhouse is one of the best septic systems I've seen in Jerome so far. Then he said, put the seepage pit here, put a seepage pit there, put the septic tank here, and don't call me again.
So we did.
Man, things used to be simple.
So we built a corral, and we had these 3 burros, and every night we'd take Jerome, he was the male, or no, it was Delilah did the water.
Yeah, because Jerome would follow.
Yeah. Down to Hildy's house with Jerry and Hildy, who lived at where the mayor now lives. You know, the Alex.
Oh,
Barber,
yeah, the
that
Barber
house.
house, yeah.
That was their house. That's
So
where
Hildy was Jerry's
Wife.
wife. He was his
Okay.
wife.
I've never met her. That was
She's
Susan
dead.
Alex's
She passed
mom?
away. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and we'd get milk jugs, plastic milk jugs, and tie 2 of them together and drop them over his back or her back, and do that 2 or 3 times and bring
We
up
could get about 6 jugs on her.
3 on each side.
And she always got the first drink.
Like panniers.
She deserved the first drink, so she got the first drink.
Sounds fair.
Right. And so we built a corral, and we kept them for 3 years. And then by this time, Chris, my son, was now in Cottonwood, or in Clarkdale at school. And one day, one of his buddies said, gee, I like burros. I think they're a great animal. And the next day, he had 3 burros.
Where did these burros mysteriously appear from?
Well, Dempsey.
All from Dempsey?
No, he had our 3 burros. We sent them down because by that time we had a truck, and the truck would.
And we had running water.
We had running water by that time. Yeah.
Oh, good.
But prior to that, we had gotten the Air Police, which was an old Air Police truck from God knows what air base, a Chevy pickup, and with the
57.
gumdrop on top and the painted blue and all that good shit. But it had obviously was an ancient creature.
Yeah.
But it was, and you drive it up to down, and the doors would fly open, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. But it would haul 2 50-gallon drums full of water too, and that took care of our water stuff. So we no longer needed the burros, and we gave them to this kid who. And I don't know whatever happened after that.
They're probably burritos by now.
He had problems. He had
Burritos.
property down by the river. I think the kid did. So he got a couple. He wound up with 3 burros, because burros they're great creatures. But so, and at the same time we had geese, and we had chickens, and we had ducks, and we had a whole menagerie in that property. We had become farmers, basically, or
Yeah.
it's outside the town limits, but it was agricultural. Well, it's a county, So that's why we couldn't get water at first, because we were outside the town limits.
Right.
But we ultimately worked that problem out somehow. I forget. And we didn't. The property was never clear title. It was Hanverger and the mines, UVX property.
The
So they said.
family owned the house and the mine company owned the property.
Right.
It was pretty standard.
Yeah.
That makes kind of.
And the property, we wanted to buy it. Ultimately, we asked them if we could buy it, but they didn't want to sell it. So,
Well, Mary didn't want to sell her house.
right, and it was really unclear as to who really owned the property, because it had been theoretically it was in the family.
No, it wasn't. The mine company owned the property.
Right, the mine company owned the property, but somebody went over and looked at the county records, right? Wasn't that the case?
No,
No, that was all myth.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
We went over and looked at tried to get the ownership of it, and the page had been torn out of the book.
I don't know.
Maybe that was myth. I don't know. I don't remember. At any rate,
So you became clerk?
so I became clerk at that point in '86. This was mid-'80s, maybe a little earlier, '85. I don't know. '81, I think. And I did that for a couple of years. As I said, Martin was mayor when I took over. And the first thing that happened was we got hit with a lawsuit. We had not been audited in years. And Peckrich and Lozano, was it Lozano? No, Peckrich and three of the guys in town, three of the old timers brought suit against us. And so I called
First of all, understand that when he took over as town clerk, the records were being kept in a shoebox.
yeah, right, that's true. When I asked to see the bookkeeping system and the general ledger and stuff, they said, what general ledger? You know, here's the shoebox and it has the bills in it, and here's the checkbook, and that's
Yeah,
it, basically. And here's the pegboard system that you send out the water bills on. And you have an office, and the first office was in the old town hall, but then they immediately moved it over to where the co-op now lives, in the hotel. Mm-hmm. And I had the office in the back corner overlooking the valley. And that was the town clerk's office. And that went on for a couple of years. And then they decided to pull it back into town hall. And so they pulled that office back into town hall. So,
Right. So Richard hired you?
Yeah, Richard.
He seemed to be a force for kind of getting the town's shit together, it seems.
Until he hired Craig Aper.
Yeah, it was the town government. Up until about that time, the town government had been run by the old timers, and the last of them was the Dragon Lady. The Dragon Lady was, I think, a manager at like Chase, or not Chase, but whatever that bank was down at the time. There were all those banks have gone through many changes. They've gone from National Bank of Arizona to this one and that one and this one and First National and Third National and 12th National and on and on and on. But it was one of the banks down there. She was the bank manager, I think, and she was a woman in her, I think, probably 40s. And she dressed in black, and she was the Dragon Lady. She was very conservative, I believe, and she didn't trust. Well, I don't know. She was having an affair with the police chief, wasn't that? There was all this stuff going on, whether it was true or not, who knew? But what was happening was that there was a changing of the guard going on. The newcomers were taking over, and Martin was the spearhead on that. And so there was a big brouhaha. And they won the election somehow. The newcomers,
Yeah.
and the old timers were out, and there was a lot of tension in the fire department. The Lozanos had been running it, and they were not getting on well. They didn't care much for the newcomers, right?
No, the old timers were running it, but at that Christmas fire, when they realized that they were too old to fight the fire and the young Mexican kids in town were fighting the fire, that's when they decided they had to let the Mexican kids into the fire department so they too could be insured.
Right.
So there was some prejudice involved before that.
Yeah.
And there was one Buddhist in a white robe.
Yeah, well, that was, yeah, he was,
Actually, it was a white tunic and white pants.
yeah.
Thank you for
No, he didn't wear
clarifying.
robes. He wore just a normal tunic and stuff. So, so the Dragon Lady was ousted. The police were hostile.
And the Dragon Lady was the town clerk.
No,
before
she
you.
was the
Oh,
manager. She was the mayor.
Oh,
she was the mayor.
Okay,
And
from
Martin
the old
became
school.
mayor.
Gotcha.
And they had some gal I don't think I've ever met. Euronymous Quigley was there. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Euronymous Quigley.
We, at one point, the town clerk's job was open, and there were several people who were quite qualified, sort of qualified, that could have done it, but they gave it to a gal who couldn't read, write, or count. But we called her, she was married to a cop, so she could be trusted to answer the phone. And I called her Euronymous Quigley because the first meeting where she read the minutes, all the votes were unanimous.
Yeah, that was pre-Martin.
Were you guys involved in government or council at
Not
that
really,
time?
no. But Jamie Moffat was also on
Oh.
that council.
Oh, no kidding.
And Jamie
With
and
the
I-
old timers, so he,
No, when,
the new one.
yeah,
Okay, and this was 80 what?
81, 82,
Okay.
somewhere in there, I believe. Actually, I looked it up before I came.
How are you guys doing?
81,
by the way?
83.
Do you want a refresh on coffee? Do you want to take
oh,
a
I'm
break?
fine, thank you.
Okay.
If you do,
I'm still good.
Okay.
We're moving along, so
So, so Moffat and I were friends. He lived where he lives now, I believe, and we lived at the other house down in Gulch, so we had known each other. And at any rate, he told me that this job was open, and did I want it? And I said, sure, I'll do it. Because I must have had some accounting in college, I think, when I was in college. So I had some concept of accounting. So I got the job. And the first thing I realized was that, hey, there's no general ledger system. There's nothing. As I say, we got the suit served on us because we hadn't been audited. And in order to, I tried to bring it together. So I called the Auditor General in Phoenix and said, hey, what do I do?
can I interject a question? So the old time Lozanos and these guys that brought a suit, it sounds like the purpose was just to give you guys a hard time.
no, there really hadn't been any audits in the town
Yeah.
for years,
Okay.
They were
But-
hostile,
but justified.
but justified. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good way to put it.
The system was in total collapse, basically. And it wasn't the only time. So it's outside, I think. Over the years, I've seen the town's bookkeeping system collapse 3 different times.
No kidding.
So, you want me to continue, or you want to wait, or what?
Okay.
I don't know what that is. Sounds like somebody dragging something through the street.
Yeah, I can edit this out, but let me check and see what's going on.
So do you have the 3 times you were town clerk?
I was only town clerk once.
Twice.
Twice.
And you brought the books back a third time
No. Oh, yeah.
when that idiot was town clerk.
I was town clerk for 2 years before I went to JIC.
Okay.
That was that was the first time, and then when I was at JIC, when Hildy took over, the books collapsed again, and when Dallas took over, oh no, there was the time that when Franchetta took over.
Well, there was that gal, that
Betsy?
Betsy,
Yeah,
Betsy Lloyd.
yeah.
She let the books collapse, and you were called in to bring them back together.
Right, there was 3 times.
Yes.
Yeah, so there was Hildy, there was that time, and there was the first time I took over as town clerk.
Betsy Lloyd. I don't remember the Hildy part, but
I think that was okay. No, that was it. That was the second. I was only 2 times that I brought in, and the third time, Jamie and I computerized it. I think that was Hildy, after Hildy, and before Betsy. So you can fidget.
Yes.
At any
I'm
rate.
trying to keep both of us happy.
I understand. So where were we? We were the town. When I took over, the town had not had an audit in several years, and we were required by law to have one every 2 years at that time, and they caught us on that.
But you hadn't been doing it.
It hadn't been done.
Right.
Richard wasn't particularly worried about that, but everybody else was. So we brought in the Auditor General and an accountant up from out in Phoenix, and we created a new general ledger system. And by the time I left office in another year, it was running relatively smoothly. But that was my first introduction to town government. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It was a challenge, and I learned a lot, and certainly I learned a lot about the town government, town council, and that sort of stuff.
Sure.
So, but then JIC came to me and said, look, we'll pay you twice what you're getting here, which I wasn't getting very much at all. The town wasn't paying well.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. And I went down there. Well, then JIC tried to go public and didn't make it. And so I had been hired to replace Barbara Blackburn, who was their general manager, and or their front office manager, or what, it was not quite clear, but I think she was their general manager. But then that whole thing collapsed, and I was redundant. So
she came back, and he was sitting in her chair.
yeah, and so, and
Simple as
meanwhile, Mimi had been working up a grant for transportation system, the Verde Valley Transit System
Authority.
yes, which I will let her tell you about.
I was going to a lot of community meetings at the time, and at one of them, the fellow said, there's money for public transportation. And I said, great, we need a bus. And he said, okay. And then I had to go through the process to create it. The first thing was to go to the Corporation Commission and establish the whole thing to get a permission to do it. At that time, you needed permission to do that kind of stuff. And one of the most helpful people was a fellow at the Corporation Commission named Ahern. And he sat me down and he said, if you're serious about running a bus system, here, and he gave me the chart of accounts, and there it was, the whole thing set out of what was necessary to run a bus system. Because
Now, where would this? What area would this serve, Mimi?
Jerome, Clarkdale, Cottonwood, and
Okay.
Camp Verde.
Oh, okay.
And so we got the permission from the Corporation Commission to do it, and got the grant and started a bus system.
Nice.
Lasted for 3 years.
And
And
what happened?
the Verde Independent libeled us, and we ended up with Currier versus Western newspaper, 175 Arizona 290.
I don't get it. Why would a newspaper? The newspaper libeled the business? Or
Yes,
the
because
organization?
we got a couple of new guys at the paper, and they were going to make, quote, make their reputations as the great right hunters, and they were going to do it by taking down this bus system because it was run by a bunch of crooks.
Okay.
And on my birthday,
Now, was this a semi-private bus system? I mean, the
It was-
organization or a private
it was
system?
a private partnership because it was started with some government grants from the different towns and the government, the federal government, plus a small business administration loan from my folks.
And so you set it up and then ran it, and then these guys.
Decided to tear it down. And by that time, we had also gotten a grant from direct from Congress. In fact, the town was very surprised because they got this call from Stumps congratulating us on getting a grant direct from Congress. And then what happened is they knew I was interested in alternative energy, especially running on buses on alcohol. And so this one gal at the Department of Commerce in Phoenix sent me a thing about government grants for alternative energy. And it was already just past the point of applying, but it had a phone number, so I called them up and talked to them about my plans for running the buses on alcohol, switching them to alcohol and methanol. And I was on the phone for about an hour, hour and a half. And the next thing I know, we got the grant and I had to do the paperwork and fill out the application, which I hadn't done then. It was all done over the phone. But they wanted to question me on how much I knew about what it would take to do it. And I guess I satisfied them because we were on a list of 10 government grants from Congress, of which our competition, not our competition, the people also were given grants, were BART and the New York Transit System and the Baltimore Transit System
That's a pretty good company.
and Jerome, Arizona. But by that time, this guy was going to take us down, and he managed to kill the bus system.
You had to spend money on legal fees. Is that what happened?
This all happened. Mimi got the bus system and all the grants came through while I was town clerk. So.
And at this point, he was writing letters to me saying, "Dear Mrs. Currier," and writing letters to the government guys saying, "Dear Joe."
Right. Because I was trying to keep
We were-
distance between the two of us.
We were
because,
trying to be very careful about
Yeah.
that.
Conflict of
And
And
your town attorney was fully involved in this, Rob Peckrich. He was,
Dear Rob, that was it.
dear Rob, he and I worked together on that, so that, because we were worried about conflict of interest. What happened was the money flowed from the feds to the town to us, because they had to have some governmental entity to give the money to. They couldn't just give it to people.
Right.
It was that kind of a grant. So Mimi created the grant, and the grant went to the town, and we administered it. Mimi administered it. And also Cottonwood was
Wait,
involved.
I think by that time you weren't town clerk anymore. You were working for the
Right,
bus system.
right. Once this all started, once the thing was approved and everything, at that point, I had moved on to JIC, so I was no longer in the picture. But Mimi was dealing directly with the town, and it also involved Cottonwood, who gave us $25,000 a year, something
I
like
don't
that.
remember.
They gave
It
us.
changed.
The budget for this thing was about 150 a year, something like that, 150,000. We had 2 buses, and what we set up was there was a hub at Safeway, and there was a line that ran out to Clarkdale and up to Jerome and then back down.
Okay.
And then there was a line that ran out to Bridgeport and came back. And then there was a line that came out to Verde Village and came back. And then we were planning on one to go to Camp Verde and then another one to go to Sedona, but it never really got that far. So the system ran, the bus ran 3 times a day,
No, more than that.
more than that. It ran down.
Something like 7.
It went to the hub and then out on a different line and then back to the hub and then out like a wheel.
Now, this was a free service, or did people pay?
It was it was 50 cents a trip or something like that, a token, but enough to, certainly not enough to support it, but enough to, so that there was community funding.
Maybe pay your drivers or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was grants from the feds, and there was grants from Cottonwood, and there was grants from the town. They used their lottery money on that. At the time, that was what you used lottery money for, was transportation. That was one of the.
Were people using it, maybe?
Some.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of people there, the drunks who had their licenses taken away, the little kids who couldn't have driver's license, the old folks who really shouldn't be driving. In fact, Doc Joe, who was Peckridge, it gave him a lot of pride because he couldn't drive anymore, but he could take the bus down to his dentist's office, and he didn't have any patients by that time anymore. But he had his self-respect because he could go to work every day.
And some independence.
Doing it on our bus.
Cool. Well,
So,
it's
but
unfortunate that all turned out that way. But
so in comes this new reporter for the Verde Independent. And also at the same time, I think Angler, the manager, shows up. This was his first. He had just become on board with them. And this young guy decided that he was going to make his name by attacking the lefties. And because this was this was communism for sure. And they ran a series of articles attacking us and saying we were all crooks. We were crooks, and everybody knew it, and nobody used it. So at first we sent him a letter and said, this guy is off base, please rein him in. And they didn't do anything about it, and the second article shows up, and then the third.
We even had an previous editor from the paper saying, hey, you guys are really blowing it with this one.
Yeah.
And then the third column came out on my birthday, and I saw Rick, what's his name? I forget his last name now, at a meeting, and I wanted to stand up and kiss him, because that day his column crossed the line, and I knew it. It violated Sullivan v. New York Times, because he printed an article that said he had Lou's signature on a document, on a contract, and I knew it didn't exist.
Yeah.
So he had either printed stuff he knew was false, or he didn't care it was false. The town clerk at the time was saying, even though he said, well, I went and checked the papers, and she said, I never saw him.
Yeah. So this guy overstepped his line, and but
And
in
then
the
I
meantime,
knew we had him.
In the meantime, the town government this is Jerome, was so worried because they were getting such bad press that they killed the contract. and gave it to somebody else.
I see. So you could have won the libel suit.
We did.
And
We
it was-
did,
okay,
ultimately.
but it didn't
It took 9 years in
turn
court.
out the way you would have with a still operating bus system.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they gave it to another guy who
They
was
gave
a
it to
nu-
Aber.
No, they gave it to, what's his name, that lived over in the Cuban Queen? Okay, at any rate, he couldn't keep it going. He didn't know what he was doing, and it failed. Meanwhile, we fought this thing through the courts. It went to Prescott, and the judge ruled against this summary judgment and said, no, you're no good,
No reason.
no reason. We went to the Court of Appeals, and they said, well, he shouldn't have done that, but we're going to stand by the primary judge. So we went to the Supreme Court,
State.
the state Supreme Court, and prevailed. They said this was a mistake. These guys are not guilty of anything, and this was libel. Or no, what they do is they send it back to the first judge.
Right.
And at that point, we settled. The insurance company we were up against, because what it was a First Amendment thing. You know, I was a public official, so a public official has to prove malice in a case of libel. They can't just say they were wrong. You have to
Sullivan v. New York
Yeah.
Times libel.
You have to prove that
Malice.
they meant to hurt you,
Right.
or they meant to do something. But because he had said that in his opening article, that I'm going to bring these guys down and make my name, that was enough to prove malice.
That and the fact that he either didn't go to town hall, or if he had, he knew the documents.
Right.
The document didn't exist.
Right. But by that time, it was too late. As I say, it took 9 years to get to the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
And
when was this?
all through the late 70s and all through the 80s. All through
Okay.
the 80s. So that was the end of that.
Yeah. Well, that
yeah.
was quite
It was
an ordeal, adventure.
Yeah,
The Purple People meters.
yeah, they were like school buses. They were bluebirds. Or
Oh,
whatever.
cool.
But they were shorter than usual.
Yeah.
They weren't the real short ones. They were the medium size.
Okay.
The buses were given to the Navajo tribe, and our bus barn was out where Scott Owens is now, out on where the town crew is now. That was our bus barn.
Okay. So,
I went to talk to McMillan to get the bus barn for the buses, and it turns out he had spent a lot of time in Cleveland during the war, and so we could talk about Mayfield Road and stuff like that. And it was a friendly enough meeting that he said, "Sure, you can have them."
Right.
that's cool.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
he was a nice guy.
Lou, what if we circled back to a little bit of, I really see this tipping point of the younger generation, Jerome generation, the Richard Martin administration, and your beginnings with as clerk, as kind of a tipping point where it's like Richard told me a lot about his work with the water system, and I'm curious, this is kind of a maturing or growing up for Jerome in a way, where you seem the younger generation had to kind of step up to the plate, take responsibility for things. You guys, either of you want to talk about that process?
Well, as I said, when Martin became mayor, that was a changing of the guard, basically. And the new people, the people who had come in the 60s and in the 70s, were now in control of the government, basically. The letter to the East Village Other was true. We took over.
But we didn't know about the letter at the time.
It's true, we didn't. And it changed the tone of the town. But we were all pretty tight at the time. Everybody knew everybody else. That's the nice thing about Jerome. It's small enough so that you can know pretty much most people. But if you get mad at somebody, it's not that hard to avoid them too. So it's big enough to have that effect. We had the Halloween dances were happening. The fire department was a unifying factor. The fire department changed to the newer people, who were now the shopkeepers. They were taking over the shops as well, and they were they were young and able to fight fires. Fire was still a bugaboo in Jerome, and it still is in many ways. But and there were one or two major fires. We lost we lost the house on the Gulch Road, and different things like that. So the fire department became a key player in the game. I think it probably always was, but from my perspective, it became much more noticeable. It tied people together. Politics, the government, it went from Martin to Jimmy Kinsella, and I forget who. We were still in the commissioner form of government. There's two kinds of government in town communities. There's the commissioner form, where you have a police commissioner, you have a fire commissioner, you have a roads and streets commissioner, and different things like that. Or you have a general manager. We did not have we tried the general manager several different times before we really became locked in. But people wanted, and it's noticeable that Jerome has a 2-year term for their council members, because I think the people want to keep a tight rein on things. It's pretty much, that's been the case. And because it's a small town and everybody goes to the meetings, or a lot of people did, and they still do, and they pay close attention. I always liked it because it's like a working democracy. I don't know whether it's true or not, but Aristotle says something to the line that a democracy works up to about 500 people, and after that it becomes an oligarchy. And we're still less than 500 people, so we're still a real democracy. And people react to it. In Cottonwood or Clarkdale, it's much bigger now, and it's no longer it's an oligarchy, basically. The big shopkeepers, the big money people, run the game, just like in the bigger, larger economy. That's the nature of the way it goes.
Yep.
So people, as I said, we started reclaiming houses. We rebuild them. Like our experience, where we rebuilt this house down in the Gulch, and other people, Fern and Jerry Shapiro, rebuilt that house.
Gary Shapiro.
Gary Shapiro, what did I say?
Jerry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gary. Gary Shapiro and Fern did theirs, and there have been a lot of them. All of Company Hill, many of them.
Hildy and Jerry.
Hildy and Jerry claimed that one. These were all really in bad shape before they came over.
Scott Owens.
Scott
The
Owens.
Dowlings.
Yeah, the Dowlings. So, so that atmosphere prevails. People watch closely, and they get upset if things don't go right. And you can have a beer with your mayor, and or you can get right in their face if you want to. And so it has a good. I think it's healthy.
Yeah, me too.
But so where were we headed? What was the question?
Well, just you're doing great. You're talking about the government, well, let's maybe get down to some. That was a good sort of social overview. How about some of the technical, physical problems, challenges you had getting the town running efficiently? Plumbing, streets.
Yeah. The town is
the crews.
Okay. After a while, well, after Mimi's, after the bus system collapsed, I became. I'm trying to separate my trying to lead into my going on government. I knew that the libel had hurt my personal reputation. That I I was becoming more and more a financial man. I was the chief financial officer for the town when I was town clerk. I was CFO. When I went with JIC, I was doing finances. I was running their front office. And I had developed this taste for accounting, basically. But I knew that, oh shit, nobody's going to trust me. I've been slandered. And yes, I may prevail in court, but
Yeah.
they don't tell you they're not hiring you because they heard this. So I figured I gotta take a change here. I gotta do something different. So I began, and I'd always liked to cook. So I moved into the food service industry. I became a sous chef over for a corporation that worked, or for an outfit that worked in Sedona, and we did weddings, and it was a catering outfit, and we did big weddings and big events. And that's how I kept food on the table for a while. But it started out slow, and we'd only work on weekends, but gradually it built up, and over the course of the next several years, I became the head chef at the Elks Club over there, and then I became, then I did my own catering, and on and on and on. So that's how I was making money, but that left me. I always like to stand on three-legged stools. A three-legged stool is pretty strong. And that was one leg. And Mimi was my second leg. She was making money through jewelry and through different things. But then I had this
Child support services,
Yeah, you worked on that.
and then the data collection for
Yeah.
grocery stores.
So we had that thing, but then I had this. I liked government. As well. So I got into, and then one day, somebody came to me and said the police chief was in the bar last night, and he said that he has a bullet in his belt for your wife, Mimi. And I said, oh, really? And then somebody else came and said the same thing. They were there. Two different people were there and reported this to me. And I said, oh. And so I said, I could go scream at him, but that ain't going to do it. So I ran for council, and I got elected. I started the year before the election. I started going to council meetings, and I just went to the meetings, and I didn't say a word, and I just listened. And then when the election came around, I knew what I was talking about, and so I got elected. And I was, I worked, I went after it, because I figured, I don't think I like this guy, and I want to be able to have some control. I want to deal with this issue. So I got elected, and I got to be finance commissioner and do the front office routine. And but then once I was in it, I realized what the job is all about, and it's got lots of different pieces to it. The town of Jerome is a great little corporation, and because it's small enough so you can see every detail. And you can see what the police are doing, you can see what the fire department's doing, you can see what the streets are up to, the water department. You can see it. It's not like Clarkdale or Cottonwood, where, there's somebody, the guy that takes care of it, but you don't know what he's doing. But here, if you're sitting in the catbird seat up there, you know what everybody's doing, and you get the feel for it. And it's fascinating. It's a real interesting organic thing. So yes, we have water problems. The springs, just recently we did a lot of work on the springs. We always have to keep an eye on the springs. The fire department needs equipment. The police have to be watched. They have to be watched. And we've had a series of cops. Muma we've had him for 15 years now, and he's the best of a bunch. And I really like him. But we've had some real stinkers before him. We had that idiot that I've talked about that, who made that stupid remark. And we had cops that, when you hire a cop, it's really serious stuff. We had one guy who went to Ann Bassett and said, "Hey, I'd like to pose nude for you if you'd like to hire me."
We had one guy who rolled 2 police cars and then had to leave town quickly because he was being chased by a bigamy charge.
Yeah. We've had guys that shot dogs. We've had guys that, there's a lot of idiots out there.
Right.
And there's a lot of them are cops. And they carry a gun, and you gotta be careful about this. This guy that I mentioned about the bullets, when I got elected, the first thing he did, within a week of me being sworn in, he came to me and said, "Hey, this other councilman here, he has a son, and I have photographs of his son in a drug bust. Or no, he didn't get busted, but he's smoking dope and he's doing this and that. And I have some photographs of that. What do you think I should do with them?"
Oh, great.
"What do you think I should do with it?" And I said, "Well, I think you should hold on to those." That's it. And then we made Ann Bassett police commissioner.
Touche.
And 2 years later, I fired the fucker.
Yeah.
I got him fired.
Now, when was this? You got
This
on
was
council?
before MUMA. This was in the 80s. 86, I think, 80s. Somewhere in there.
Mimi, have you ever been on council or
No.
worked in any of the?
Nope.
Okay. Just curious.
Mimi
I
is.
thought you had. I had some memory of design review or something like that.
Oh,
that you
yeah,
were-
I've been on some of the boards,
Some of the
but not the
boards.
council.
Okay. Well, I'm lumping all those together.
No, it's different. So Mimi's too outspoken to get elected.
Too honest? Too
Yes.
forthright?
Yes, exactly. And I think she'd be good at it, but she's too outspoken. At any rate, whereas I'm smooth and slick and all that good shit, but yeah. So
Well,
that's why I ran.
that got you motivated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but once you get into it, it is a wonderful thing. And then as far as the finances of the town, I've seen when I took over, as I say, the general ledger system was in collapse. It wasn't there. I've seen that happen twice afterwards. Well, I saw the general ledger system collapse one other time, and then there was the gal who crashed the whole system because she had been taking money and didn't want any, and was going on vacation and didn't want anybody to know about it. So she wiped out the whole financial system,
covered her tracks.
and it cost thousands of dollars to rebuild it and figure out what had happened.
Oh my gosh.
So I was not in office at that time. But,
Crashed the computer system.
yeah.
Okay.
I was not in office at that time, but
Where does
They called you in to fix it.
no, not that time.
Oh.
There was another time where the system collapsed, and Jamie Moffat and I came in and rebuilt, and this was when they first went to computers. He was a programmer. That's one of his talents. He was a programmer. So we built the system. I knew what was needed, and he knew what to do, how to get it.
how to do it? Yeah.
Yeah. So we built it, and then and so that's at least twice. And then there's this third case where the gal deliberately crashed it. That was after they had computers.
Right.
So there's, at the moment, in fact, just recently, 2 years ago, we had to let go the clerk, or the finance manager, finance person, who really didn't know what she was doing.
Dropped the ball.
She dropped it. And we had to bring in people from outside and do it again. So it can happen because the problem with it's a wonderful little system, but it doesn't have a lot of money. It doesn't have a lot of money because it's a small system. It doesn't have a lot of money, and when it comes to hiring people, that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, Richard would tell me about how you guys basically run the town on a shoestring.
Yeah,
And you
it's
had like maybe 2, 3 at the most crew members, maybe less. Two or three people in the office.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah.
And the secretary or something, and him, and that was it.
Yeah. At that point, we had, when Richard was there, we had 2 crewmen and myself and a P&Z guy. And I think Ballator was around, but I'm not I think he was acting as manager, but there
He
was
was
still the
police chief.
commissioner government too, huh?
He was police chief.
Yeah, he was police chief, but they combined that with manager for a while. See, this was before they really knew what the hell they were doing.
I
And,
kind of had to piece it together, make
yeah.
it work.
And so we now have, I think, 5 crewmen and 1, 2, 3, at least 3 people in the administration,
Yep.
and
There's
lots of guys on the fire department. Well, it's just Rusty and maybe his second right now, but all the rest are volunteers or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
and the police we run with 1, 2, maybe 5. I don't know. It's hard to see. Police, we want to try and maintain 24/7 service on that, and to do that you need at least 5 people to run any kind of system for 24/7. Because somebody's on vacation or somebody's off duty, and
Right.
it's
Somebody's got to sleep.
right. The crew, and again, budget time. It's tough. It's tough because
Yeah.
you got to
It's a
give
big
them.
challenge we're facing, how to raise money, and
Yeah,
people are barking about all the different ideas coming out right now, but we got to sift through them.
yeah. So there's trying to generate revenue is a problem. We haven't raised property taxes in years because there's no point in it. Property taxes are such a small revenue source. You can only raise them a certain amount each year. That's the
Right.
rules of the game.
Generally, they support school systems.
Well,
in most communities.
yeah, most of the property tax goes to the state and the different districts, but the town gets about 50,000 a year out of that. But to raise it would give you 51,000, and you're dealing with a budget that's 5 million or 6 million or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
it's not worth the time to try and raise it, and it makes everybody unhappy when you raise their property taxes anyway. So they don't. But sales tax at the moment is the big income source, and it's regressive, but for Jerome it works as best it
Right.
can.
How do you feel about the parking meter idea?
I don't really care one way or the other. I think it's complicated. They're talking, when I was in office, they were talking about kiosks that could take credit cards or that sort of stuff. And it would be voluntary. You would have a sign that says, "Please help support this and put in your money if you want." Now, last time I heard, there was an effort to make it mandatory.
Right.
But as soon as you try and make it mandatory, you've got to have somebody monitoring it.
That
And-
takes your profits.
Right.
Yeah, that takes your profit.
Yeah.
Plus, it's it's a headache. It's a
You
headache.
could get a smart burro to walk around.
Yeah, right, really. So if they make it mandatory, I don't think it'll work. I don't think
Okay.
it'll work. But if they don't, if they can, and if they don't make it mandatory, I don't know, but I think it will generate some money.
Yeah.
How much, I don't know. That's
Well, let me go back to a little. I was wondering who was on the council when you first ran. Who were you working with?
when I first ran for
Yeah.
council,
And how many times have you been on?
I think it was 6 or 7.
Oh, you've been through six
6 or 7 councils.
Terms.
Yeah, I think I did about 13, 14 years.
Were they continuous?
No, no.
Or
I did them
contiguous, I
for
guess
I
is
did
the
them
word.
for a couple of years, 2 years, and then as I say, oh no, let's see, for 2 years, and then we opened the restaurant, and I got okay. And I forget exactly how that worked, but I left it. I did it 1 year because of Mimi, and I was worried about that. The second year, I decided, well, let me see if I did a good job. So I ran again, and I got elected. And I said, okay, I did a good job. Thank you. I'm going to do something else now. So I went off, and because I have an accounting business that I do too when I'm not doing anything else. I take care of people's bookkeeping and small business setups and whatever comes down to taxes. So I did that, and then I had a restaurant. We had the restaurant,
Right.
and so I was off doing other stuff.
That's where the Mine Cafe
Yeah,
is now.
yeah,
you had the
yeah.
bread.
Reynard's.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did
right.
Reynard's,
Remember?
and that was fun. That was a nice. I really enjoyed that. Reynard's was fun. I thought we did a good job on that, but we ran afoul of the banks on that one.
Oh.
We paid off a $43,000 credit card, so they canceled our credit card.
Yeah. The mistake was.
I got rid of mine.
Yeah, well, we had been running it on credit cards, and we had other assets. We had properties here and there, but we had one card that was $35,000 we had on it, and we sold the property and paid it off, and this was 07. 2007. And one day I got a call out of the blue. I'm sitting having lunch, and it was an off day or something. I forget why I was at home, and Mimi says, "Hey, there's somebody here on the phone for you." And I answered it. And this guy says, "I'm with the Bank of no, I'm with Chase, and I want to know how much money you made last year." What? Who are you? You know, this is a voice out of the fog,
Yeah, I
wanting to
didn't call
know
you.
how much I made and what's this, and so I lowballed it, and I didn't know I didn't know who I was talking to. He didn't.
Should have refused to answer.
I should have. Yeah, I should have just said talk to my accountant or something, but I didn't. And by the end of the conversation, he said, "Well, we just canceled your credit card because you're not making enough money." Well. I had payroll in 2 days, you know, wait a minute. And so we just shut down.
Yeah.
Oh, so no, then I went down to the bank. I went down to Chase, and I knew the manager down there, and I said, "Hey, there's something wrong. I got a perfect credit rating. I've never missed a payment. I've always, I checked my credit rating, and it's 98 or whatever, 980 or whatever, 890 or something. But it was perfect, no problems. Why are they doing this? What are they doing?" So she said, "Okay, well, I'll look into it." And I said, "Well, you know, I gotta get. Well, I'll look into it." Okay, so nothing happens. And I went back in a week or so and said, "Hey, what's going on?" She said, Where's the manager? "Oh, she's on vacation." I see. Okay. So we closed shop.
Couldn't keep it open on the backs of our employees.
No,
Yeah.
and I paid off.
The restaurant business is a tough business.
Yeah, no, and I know that. I mean, as I said, I've been in food
Yeah.
service for years.
Yeah.
So I figured, and people came to us and said, "Gee, we'll give you some money." And I said, "No, I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to play."
Yeah.
The newspaper had to print a retraction and an apology in 3 different editions of the paper.
Above the fold.
Regarding what?
The
libel.
libel thing.
Oh.
Yeah. We have a big blow up of it that shows up every once in a
And
while.
this is the Verde Independent?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for years they wouldn't touch me when I was running through council and all that stuff. They wouldn't. I never appeared. Finally, they decided I was okay, and it was enough time had passed. The Engler is still their manager down there, or he was yesterday, as far as I know.
Yes,
But,
he is. Yeah, Dan.
But he survived. But the other guy, the reporter, they transferred him to Bullhead City, and a month later, I heard he was in a mental hospital. So
Ah,
who knows whether that's true or not? But that's what I heard.
I wonder which of the people in the divorce Engler was friends with.
In what divorce?
Of the
Oh, they're in court now because
Solden, what's
of
his name?
in Prescott. They got the same people that own the Prescott Currier own the Verde
Independent. They own several newspapers.
and they're big time news over there right now. The guy that owns it tried to kill his wife or some weird thing, wasn't
They're
it?
divorcing.
They're divorcing, and it's a
So I don't know
mess.
which one Engler was the friends with
It's a nasty divorce.
that kept his job through this whole thing.
Yeah, he's been there ever since.
Yeah, Dan's, well, I know him because of my sister. He's covered,
Yeah.
they've written stories on Lori and the band
Yeah.
through the years.
Good.
So,
But,
well, how about amusing stories of Jeromans and fun stuff that kind of makes you
laugh.
laugh?
I don't know offhand. I'm sure there are some, but
Oh, we'll think of them later when we get
yeah,
home.
really.
Great. Well, you'll.
The French expression, the wit of the staircase.
Right. But the one story I remember, which I always thought was nice, was one of the Halloween party, the masquerade balls, where Carol Whitner, one of the ones I remember very well, they carried the middle of the party, or the middle of the dance, in come 6 pallbearers carrying a coffin, and they go to the stage, and they lay the coffin down, and they open it up, and there's Carol Whitner with a rose in her teeth. I thought that was a great one.
From when they bought the mortuary.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So she's getting ready to move back in, I think.
Yep.
Oh, she is Carol Whitner.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
Carol.
Her husband passed away a year ago, something like that.
Yeah, about that.
And she still has a house over in Sedona, I guess, but I think she's coming back here.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, we see her every once in a while.
She
she's-
helps out with the Humane Society flea market.
Right, we haven't touched on the Humane Society. We've been, Mimi, 20 years ago, Mimi got a grant for the Humane Society. She wrote the grants. She's good at writing grants. And
I can even get them over the phone.
yeah, and that was the beginning of the Jerome Humane Society.
No, it wasn't.
Wasn't?
No, it wasn't at all. The
Okay.
beginning of the Jerome Humane Society was, what's his name? The older fellow who put cans around town to help pay for the
Redacre,
spaying.
Steve Redacre.
Yeah, he put cans around town to collect money to help pay for the spaying and neutering of the dogs and cats in town. That was the beginning
Right.
of the Humane Society. And then Mary Wills and various other people got together to try and actually form a Humane Society. And there was somebody who wanted to take it to an attorney, and the attorney wanted a huge amount of money just to get the papers incorporated. And I said, fuck that shit. And I did the paperwork, and we got our incorporation. And then I did a paperwork, and we got our not-for-profit status. And then I did paperwork and got a grant from Bob Barker for an x-ray machine and some other equipment. And then I got a second grant from Bob Barker to do a different, newer x-ray machine and some more equipment.
Wow.
Well, it's really easy to get a grant. There's a trick to it.
Yeah.
I got a full card on that one.
Okay, you need another
Okay,
pen?
that one's stopping. That's all right.
That's okay. It's focused on me. That's
Excuse
all right.
me
to
for
stop it.
interrupting you.
That's okay. You want to know what the trick is?
For
Getting a grant?
oh, I thought you'd get more memory on my card.
No, to get a grant.
Yes, I do.
Be selling what they want to buy.
Yeah,
Ah,
that's it.
okay.
The government wanted to buy a small bus system to switch it to methanol, and we were selling that with a dramatic change in altitude and seasons. And this mountain is used by several car manufacturing companies for test driving. First time I saw manufacturer's plates was on cars going through Jerome. And because of all that, because it offered such an opportunity, I could get that grant over the phone.
Right. Yeah. You're who they're looking for.
Right, exactly. That's
Yeah.
the key. That's the
Yeah.
trick.
Okay. I'll remember that because I may want to do some of that as one of my stool legs in the future.
Really. So, yeah, because the flea market is this weekend, so that's
Yes.
we're thinking about that. But so I became Mimi. First, Mimi was their treasurer for a while, and then she got busy with that, running around counting widgets or whatever it was.
It's also more than, it was above my pay grade, and it was still within his.
So I became their treasurer, and that's been the last.
And you still do that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's been the last 7 or 8 years.
Well, it's a pretty well-oiled machine, and from
oh yeah,
from
it
afar.
runs well.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. It gets lots
Good
of,
group of people.
and we get lots of good funding too. People like us. That's how you know they like you, when they give you
Yes, when
money.
they give you
We don't turn any animal away,
Right.
and everybody knows that.
Yeah. There's some great volunteers.
Yeah, because that's the clinic has been. I don't know if you've ever been to that clinic.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had several cats.
Okay. Good. So yeah, that's a good
Joan
thing.
and Marge also were very instrumental in getting the whole thing started.
Yeah, Joan Sedgwick and Marge Mitchell.
Yeah. Marge.
Marge is still the president. Joan passed away quite a while ago.
Right.
They were, but now Mary and Sally seem to be the lead. In my mind, Mary is the chairman of the board, and Sally is the assistant manager.
Sally is to do all the work.
Yeah, Sally's the manager. Marge is the president, and then there's me as treasurer,
And Mary's the whip cracker.
she's the chairman of the board. Yeah, yeah, she's a character in her own right.
Indeed. I just asked her to come talk to me.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
So, but she's
She'll
a
be
little
good.
busy this week.
She'll be good though. She's old Arizona,
Yeah.
and she was friends with Fern and Gary and all those other folks that were down in Phoenix together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's good.
I have a little bit of that story from some people.
Yeah, we were not. We were out San Francisco, but there was a whole group of Phoenix people.
Right. Well, any other things you can think of that we haven't touched on that would be important for people 50 years from now to know about the growing pains?
Other than Jerome is a haven for the voluntarily insane.
The voluntarily insane. I like that.
Right, that's Shorty Powell, wasn't it?
Yes. Oh, that's who.
Yeah.
That's another person that Shorty Powell. Shortly before we got here, Shorty Powell was a hunchback painter who lived in the High House shop, and he and a friend of his would once a week do concerts where they would blast it out to the street across from the House of Joy and do lectures about the concerts.
Classical music, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And
And we have one of his paintings.
he was a painter. And then there was the Jerome Marching Band. Remember Light Opera and Jerome Marching Band?
No way.
Yeah, you were part of that,
when
weren't
was
you?
this?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't? Okay.
Do you know about
This
it?
was
Oh well,
in
it was Ramon Dana.
who used to live on the Hogback. On Dundee Point. Dundee Point.
I think he still lives down below it.
I think they sold that house.
Oh, did they?
I think they did.
Him and
But
Pauline?
they had a little orchestra here for a while.
Small. Not
They
very
did.
effective.
The light opera piece was
Chamber.
There was a group that did
the restaurant
the
guys.
Jerome Light Opera. And
They weren't the same? Okay. Maybe not.
no,
The one guy that owned the
Candy Kitchen,
Candy Kitchen, yeah,
which is now the Mile High.
Right.
right. When we first came, the Candy Kitchen was the center of activity.
And they still made candy.
Everybody,
And there was a dead penguin, stuffed penguin in the window.
that was Laura Williams, yeah.
No, that was the Candy Kitchen.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, it might have moved across the street to Laura's shop when she went next to Paul and Jerry's.
That could be, because that's where I remember the penguin.
Yeah.
So that was a hub of
The
social.
Yeah, everybody would
interaction.
have breakfast there. It was one of
Okay.
those things.
Yeah.
It looked entirely different than it does now inside, but it was, and everybody would go in for breakfast, and it was the center of the community basically. Paul Gross, who got the water system, was the owner of it, and
Dempsey got the water system.
well,
Paul Gross was mayor
He
when
was
the
mayor
money
when-
came in,
yeah.
but there was Nixon had was doing a thing of cutting off, good old Republicans, cutting off water system money, and I knew that the Dempsey, who had been on the council at the time, was trying to get the federal grant to do the water system. And Nixon put the kibosh on any new water system money. And I said to John, does that mean us? And he said, no, we got ours in just under the wire. But then the next council took over, and Paul Gross took credit for what John Dempsey had done.
right. That was a council. Who was on that council? When was Jerome on the council? He was in when Gross resigned.
I don't remember.
Remember that there was that incident where the mayor resigned and Rome was vice mayor, so he became mayor, and he immediately resigned.
And then that's when Richard stepped in for
That
the
must
first
be.
time.
That may
Yeah.
be it. That may be it. Yeah.
Yeah, Richard told me that the first time he was mayor was as a result of resignation, not a vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he did get elected once.
After that, he
At
ran
least
again.
once,
Yes, yeah.
There's a write-in and won.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that was the change of the guard, and so the Dragon Lady must have been mayor at that time. That was it. She resigned, and Rome was the vice mayor.
No, it was Ebert. And,
Ebert was in
and they
there,
were
too.
going to, Ebert had gotten elected mayor, and they were going to come after him because he was gay and wasn't allowed yet. And so he couldn't handle the heat for that, so he resigned. And
Right.
then I think Rome resigned.
Yeah. Okay. There was a lot of turmoil at that point, both in the council and in the police force. I remember, but I don't remember details clearly. This was because the Dragon Lady must have been before Ebert. She was voted out and Ebert was voted in. I bet that was it. I think that was it.
And they were upset about it.
She was leading the hostility at the time, or she was part of the hostility at the time. I don't know. So it was the conservatives versus the new, younger.
The old school versus
Old
the new
school,
school.
yeah.
Well, she wasn't even old school. They weren't even old school. They were newcomers who were pushing.
Yeah, yeah. We've had some of that. That happens with some regularity, where somebody will move into town and say, "Hey, this is great. Let's just take it over." You know?
Right.
But they also say, oh, I love this town. It's my favorite place. I can't stand where I'm from. I just love this place. Now let me change it to how it was at the place I hated.
Yeah, that does happen.
We did it this way.
Yeah. So there is that.
Well, Jerome seems to have a fairly healthy immune system for keeping that tempered, I would say.
It's in the water.
You think?
It comes and goes. It's hard to say whether it's I'm thinking about today.
Yeah, how do you feel about Jerome holding on to its character in the coming 10, 20 years?
It's been discovered. I mean, and that's a problem.
Indeed.
Jerome hasn't kept its character since long before we moved here. It's
Yeah.
constantly changing.
That's true.
It's not a big mining company town anymore.
No, I know that. I'm
Yeah.
talking about kind of the history that we've talked about. Your era here and
Constantly
mine.
changing.
Yeah.
And as I said, there were those people after the mine company, but before we got here,
Yeah.
that were a bunch of artists that came to,
Right.
because it was inexpensive and because they loved the place. It was
do-
picturesque.
Do you notice any theme running through it? Consistent?
No,
Huh. Well, why have you stayed here? Why do you like it so much? I'm assuming you do.
I came here originally before knowing about it, except for Jerome, Arizona. It had clean air, it had clean water, it was a safe place to kick my kid out so he could play, and I wouldn't have to worry about him because everybody knew who he was and where he belonged.
Right.
I saw no reason to stop because it's still got clean air and clean water. And the kid's kicked out and gone now, but it offered a lot, and it offered a lot for him. He got some opportunities here that I don't think he would have gotten in a big city. He got put under the wing of different people. Like there was a friend of ours from San Francisco who was town crew and then worked on a minor construction company in Cottonwood. So he managed to get Chris on for Saturdays and after school. And Chris got into it and ended up now being quite successful as a project manager for, well, he keeps getting stolen from one construction company to another, each one bigger and more foreign, because he developed a specialty, which is I can take a project that another project manager is screwing up and I can bring it back from the edge. And that's talent that a lot of different construction companies are in the market for. So every time he calls, it's, well, I'm moving to a different company and they're paying me a lot more money now.
Where is he now?
Now he's in Southern California.
Okay.
Right.
Just moved from Salem, Oregon. And before that,
Phoenix.
he was in Phoenix, but
Did he
doing the
stick-
Southwest.
Do you stick around Jerome for a while in his younger life after high school?
Oh,
No.
well, he went to school first a couple years at Yavapai, got the AA degree there, and then went on to ASU, and got his degree in logistics management and purchasing. And it's because of Scott Owens, because Scott Owens would, with Lou and Tony Pham, would play these reconstruction war games where you'd take this board with hexagons all over it, and the map was the size of the dining room table, and there were these little chits, and like with Gettysburg, this is a horse, and this is a guy, and this is this and that and the other thing. But the booklet for the war was that thick, and it had different sided dice like Dungeons and Dragons. And so it taught history, it taught reading, it taught math, it taught all these different things. For instance, you had to get a higher roll because Napoleon would oversleep at Waterloo, and so you needed a higher roll to get him on his horse. But he had piles, so it took a higher die because he had to go slower. All these little things was involved in this, and it was all logistics. If you can get everything together at the right place at the right time, then it works. And that's how it is with construction. His specialty is the major gigantic underground water stuff for municipalities. And if you can get it all together at the backhoes and the pipe and the guys and the this, that, and the other at the same time, it works. And it's all logistics. And he, at Lou's 60th birthday party, he sat there and told Scott that thanks to him, he was good at his job.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrific. So you'd say the common theme, Mimi, is voluntary insanity of all the characters and people that tend to congregate here or move here.
Yes, but it's a haven.
How do you mean?
We could kick him out and he wouldn't get killed. Or kidnapped. He'd just.
Oh, you're talking about Chris.
I'm talking about Jerome.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jerome is the haven.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's true. One of the reasons we're here is because we're not all there. I mean, and that works in all kinds of ways. It's always been counterculture. It's
Yes.
always been counterculture since I've been here. And in the early days, before the mines even, or in the early days of the mines, it was certainly wild. You know, there's stories about the cowboys riding through town, shooting in the air and all that stuff.
The most sinful, wickedest town in...
Yeah, there's all that stuff, and a lot of it was true. So we've always been, there's been a lot of outlaws in this town.
Yeah.
And it's
Outlaws and in-laws.
yeah, so
Well, when I first moved here, I don't notice it anymore, but I did when I first moved here in '94, and I would drive up from Phoenix, and when I would come up the hill here and turn the bend at the high school, I could always feel this kind of electric, some kind of buzz, charge, something every time. You know, I'm kind of acclimated, I think, to it now, but
It's true.
my pet theory is there's something about all this metal in the ground that...
yeah.
There are some of us still, every time we come up the mountain, say a little thank you for having been allowed to find the place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's common. I think everybody really feels lucky to be here that's here, I think, or oftentimes. I've never really had an urge to be anywhere else once I got here. And it's not always easy being here. It's,
Oh.
sometimes, and it can break your heart sometimes. Things go wrong that you wish had gone a different way.
Right.
Um,
Politics. in
Politics,
particular.
for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just very frustrating, but it's in the long run, it's I'm happy to be here. I've always been happy to be here.
Yeah.
I really don't.
But on things that can go wrong, every time there's a rainstorm, there's a wall that falls. Sometimes it's a ruin and nobody even notices. Frequently it's a ruin that nobody notices. But sometimes it's half the highway.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was half the highway. It was the Cuban Queen. There used to be that house up on Jerome that melted. Remember that?
Yeah.
The wall at Holly Street collapsed. There's the one down by the Methodist Church just below there that you see people working on all the time, every once in a while.
Yeah.
And it's raining.
It takes constant maintenance to keep this town going.
Yeah.
The crew is they're doing real well lately, but it's hard, and it's not just us. The whole nation is. The infrastructure is collapsing, and this idea that Pelosi and Trump are fighting over infrastructure, it's
Oh, we got to stop the wars.
Where's
Yeah.
Lyndon Johnson when we need him?
yeah, really. So,
Till he got into the wars and ruined it.
but
I'm going for Tulsi Gabbard.
She's one of the three I'm in favor of.
Good to hear.
yeah,
The other's Bernie and Elizabeth.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Tulsi's can stand up to the military-industrial complex
That's why
better
they're-
than Bernie.
That's why they won't allow her to have it.
I know
But-
it's crazy what they're doing to her right now.
But Elizabeth has a plan for that.
Okay, we'll see.
We'll see what happens.
It's the best.
I'm with Pocahontas.
Well, let me ask you a funny question I've asked before. If you could put a message in the bottle, both you, or separately, to Jerome's 50 years from now, what would you want them to know or say to them?
Keep the faith.
Yeah.
Faith in?
Whatever.
Lou?
What would I tell them? Have fun. Have fun. That's the best thing to do. I don't know. I on a bad day, I don't think Jerome will last, but we'll see.
On a bad day, you don't think anything's going to last.
Right, that's true. Yeah, really, that's when I get to that. I don't.
Well, we all go there.
Yeah.
Life's not easy. Life's not easy.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's. I don't like the way the planet's going, and I don't like the way the empire's going. And
Yeah, me either. But that's a whole different
that's
interview.
beyond
huh?
our pay grade, I suppose. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. Unless you guys have something else, I
think that's enough.
think we've wrapped it up. I'm probably. You guys are tired. I'm probably tired.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's enough.
Well, thank you so much for hanging in. Lou and Mimi Currier.